Nwaneri tries one!
Well, we have some big news to talk about to you today, and that is the fact that Mohamed El Nani apparently had a kid with a secret second wife, and we're all just now finding out about it. This is Not That Kind of Gooner, an Arsenal podcast, and that is correct. It's not the big news that we have to talk about today, but Mohamed El Nani apparently really did have a secret second kid, or a secret kid with his second wife, which as an Egyptian American is the most Egyptian thing I've ever heard of. That's peak Egyptian behavior. Moving to Dubai and starting a second family. I've heard this story a couple times before. Let's just say that. But yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of things tonight, and with me is John, who you can follow on Twitter 305cast, and we're going to talk about all that stuff. But first, John, how are you doing? And do you want to be the very best?
I want to catch them all, fans. I want to catch all of them, and hopefully Arsenal do too.
I feel like Andrea Berta is getting his Ash Ketchum on. So
yeah, he is. He's trying to collect he's trying to collect all of them.
Yeah, all the Chelsea players.
Well, yeah. It's hard. Like I said, if you throw a dart at the Premier League, it's hard not to hit a Chelsea player.
Yeah. It's too many of them. That's why they're making the Club World Cup final. But before we get into kind of the stuff that we had planned to talk about today, I just a couple notes on some heavy topics that have emerged over the last few days. First of all, our hearts go out to everyone who's been affected by the Texas floods. That death toll is now over 100. And it's just really tragic and really sad to see happen. So, if there's a way for you to help or to get involved with those efforts, I highly encourage you to do so. I'm trying to find something on my end where I can assist in any way. And it's just really sad. And then on top of that, of course, Diogo Jota and his brother died in a car accident late last week, which is also really sad. They were both, Jota was 28 and his brother was 26. I don't want to say thoughts and prayers. There's so much of a negative connotation around that these days. I really do, like, my heart breaks for, first of all, his family and his friends and his loved ones. Again, that's not an age to go. That's way too soon. But second, just for not only Liverpool fans, but fans of the Portuguese national team and Portuguese football and Wolves and Porto and just anyone in football who enjoyed him, and that includes us. He was a great player. He basically won everything there is to win with Liverpool, and he still had plenty of career left. So it's just really sad. And then lastly, and this is more local for us, is on Friday, last Friday, Thomas Partey was formally charged with 5 counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault, and those counts apply to 3 separate alleged victims. I should add that Thomas Partey has denied these allegations, but yeah, we're not going to talk about that today. We are going to talk about that as soon as we can. It's just that we felt that it would be best if we waited until an episode where, myself and John and Drew were all present to, each give our thoughts on that. But, just want to let you guys know we're not trying to ignore it or hide from that. That is a really important conversation we need to have. And needless to say, it's a really dark moment in the history of Arsenal Football Club, and they will, Arsenal will rightfully be questioned and criticized for how they've handled the matter, and that is, of course, the crux of what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about the charges or the ongoing cases because British law frowns upon that a little bit. So just wanted to mention all those at the top. And again, we live in a world where terrible things happen, unfortunately. So, but one thing that did happen this week, it's so hard to transition from these kinds of subjects. So just, I'm sorry, I'm not that smooth. But just kind of on to the football subject. So it turns out we've chosen Victor Gyökeres. That it turns out that's what happened. And I just want to say from the get-go, I was a little disappointed, a little underwhelmed. I got this news at about 8:30 in the morning on a boat crossing into the Boston Harbor so I could fly home. I was sipping an ice shake and espresso, which I guess dulled the impact a little bit for me, but I was initially underwhelmed. In the days since, I do think I'm coming around to it. And so I'm looking forward to talking about that with you, John. But first, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on Gyökeres, and is this a move that you're excited for, and what do you think he's going to bring?
I am excited for it. Remember when we were all going over the Sesko and Gyökeres ones, and I know you and Drew were all on Sesko, and I was the one that was saying a little bit more excited about Gyökeres, and I think it's because I'll tell you the last time I think we had a player, and I'll get into it because there's a Reddit user named Larry von Schneiser on Reddit.
Excellent.
And he's really cool. It's a username on Reddit. And he's allegedly a Swedish. He wrote a Swedish perspective on the Gunner subreddit, kind of delving into a lot of the old interviews that he had. So I'm going to share some of that from it. But the kind of overarching feeling is that this is a guy who's grinded. He was on the grind to get where he is. And you can kind of see that reflected in the style of play that he has. He is relentless. And even when he played us, he hit the woodwork at one point. It was like this. He was nonstop trying to score. Even when we were like 5-0, 5-1, we were beating him 5-1. He was still hitting the woodwork, and that kind of determination to score goals, I feel like has been missing in this team, that kind of grit. And I'll tell you, the last kind of player I remember like that was Alexis Sanchez. And I've said for a long time that I want a player who has the desire to score or make something happen as much as Alexis Sanchez has in the front attacking side of Arsenal. You could argue that Saka has that too. I think Saka definitely, but he can sometimes get what's the word I'm looking for? Defended out of games sometimes, especially recently once people know that he's such a threat. Now, when you have to deal with both of these guys, it's going to be a nightmare. Right now, Kai Havertz does a lot for the team. He goes back, he drops back. He does a lot more than just try to score goals. But someone who's that physical presence that Gyökeres has, as well as that just undying tenacity to try to get the ball in the back of the net, that's what I've been wanting from a striker for a long time. And what this person posted was very interesting. So what he indicated, he's born in 1998 in the southern district of Stockholm. And I guess it's this bloomy area with a lot of football pitches, according to him. He started playing at 5 years old. And I know a lot of people know a lot of this stuff, but, in case you didn't, his first club was, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but I am going to try to pronounce it. IFK Aspudentelis. It wasn't a big academy, kind of a local club. From age 5 to 14, he stayed loyal to that club, which is nearly a decade. And apparently in Sweden, a lot of talented kids end up switching out of where they're going. But he stayed with them. And his dad, apparently, Stefan, was the one who he played in lower divisions and became his coach eventually. And he kind of said, you need to kind of stick around. At one point he was spotted by BP, which is kind of their version of Haaland, like the Arsenal or Ajax Academy. And they produce a lot of national team players. Most of the national team players from Sweden come from BP. It's Broman. I'm not going to try to say it. And this is around 2012. And He was invited to train with them. He wanted to go. His dad said no. His dad said, you got to stick around. You got to kind of grind it out, which kind of exemplifies this path that he's had, this kind of what this person identifies as slow and stubborn, and I think that's that kind of mentality of, making sure, just grinding out, right? And then even when he went to just grinding out, it's just important. It's important, I think, for any player, but particularly one where you want some kind of a lasting impact on their mentality and how they play, right? You're someone who's not going to be deterred. If they're stopped by a defender, they're not going to throw their arms up in the air and stop. They're going to keep going and going and going and grinding and grinding. That's the kind of player I've wanted at Arsenal, and we can get into more because there's some interesting stuff about the history of his career. But I am excited about the signing. There are concerns that I have, and I think a lot of people share them. Obviously, the Portuguese league is a very different animal than the Premier League. I mean, he scored against top opposition, so we can't really say that he's never done it before. But at the same time, you look at at who he's playing against, and my concern is what happens when he's continuously frustrated more often than not. When he's not scoring for a period of time, is he going to be able to overcome that? We'll see. But his background is grinding. It's like, I want to read this one thing that he says.
Yeah, sure.
He's not a product of hype. He's a product of gravel, patience, and sheer jävlar anima, which is, I guess, a Swedish word. And I'll tell you what that means.
I'm guessing it's something to do with like relentlessness or.
Yeah, he says, look that word up. So I'm going to go look up that word, and we're going to know what it means. He's a product of jävlar anima. Anima.
I hope that's not the one I'm thinking of right now.
No, it's not. Very direct and upfront. So that's what I'm. Yeah. So he's not a product of hype. He's a product of gravel. I like that. We need that in this team, I think, especially up front.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? Yeah, here's the case against Victor Gyökeres, right? And that is he's 27, so there's not resale value, right? Which, that the importance on that really depends on how much of a win now mode you're in. It's not the biggest red flag for me at this point in time, especially because there's another 27-year-old player that I'm dying for us to get, and we'll probably get to him later in the pod. But there's that. But maybe the main thing is that, the strength of the leagues that he's performed in are not all that high, right? I think it was Opta that came out and said that the level of, pretty much the majority of the Portuguese league is kind of comparable to League Two in England, and so it's you have to wonder about how he's going to fare against Premier League players, right? We're talking the most competitive league in the world. Every team has, really, really tremendous players. We're watching Manchester United and Spurs at their worst in maybe their histories, strolling to a Europa League final, right? This is a really high-powered league that Gyökeres is going to make the leap to. And I think for me, another issue is, the lack of aerial prowess. And, when we talked about this offline, Drew said that Thierry Henry wasn't exactly great in there either. And I do think that's a fair point, but this Arteta team is really geared towards winning those duels, especially in the air. And to have a center forward who can't serve as that focal point, if we want to go long, if we want to go over the press, I do wonder about that. Now, of course, you do have Havertz, who can play that role. And I think people are acting like Gyökeres is going to come in and play 90% of the time. I do think it's going to be more of a timeshare between him and Havertz, depending on matchup, right?
Or maybe we end up changing it up. If you look at what happened in the Champions League, you kind of look at some of the Club World Cup stuff. You're starting to see a shift towards two strikers.
Yeah.
You look at like Milan, for example. And, this was a successful team with 2 strikers. So I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but, Arteta's, if anything, showed that he'll adapt to what he has and kind of what the current meta is in the league. He'll adapt. So it might, we're assuming he's going to be a lone striker, and it's probably the case, but you never know. It might be a case where we see 2.
Yeah, and you could even do that in the 4-3-3, where I think we tried to do that with Havertz when he first arrived, where we played him at left center mid, but kind of as a second striker. So I think you could do that, right? So, I think some of these risks are mitigated, and the case for Gyökeres, which I think grows more convincing by the day, right, is that number one, if you look at his record in the Portuguese league and for Coventry City,
it's insane. It's
insane. People didn't come close to it. He had for Sporting 97 goals in the last 2 seasons.
Insane.
And in the league this season, I think the second best scorer in the Premier Liga had like half the goals that Gyökeres had, right? So, while he is definitely not going to show up and score 50 goals this season for Arsenal, and if he did, we're winning a double, right? But he
does. I don't know. Maybe
he does, right? We'll put that on a 1% chance he does that, right?
Yeah.
But even if he doesn't do that, I still think the floor for Gyökeres is 15 goals and assists in all competitions. Like, that's the absolute floor to me.
So I think it's a good point. So first of all, you mentioned one of the negatives was his age. I think that, yes, I think you're getting more of a finished product kind of at the prime areas of his career. But, 27, 30 is the new 24 now with sports science, with the way that players have learned how to manage injury and stuff, and the science has progressed so that that kind of ceiling of age is actually getting pushed further and further. We're seeing it statistically across all the different leagues, not just the Premier League. I will say even before that, though, I believe Arteta signed when he was over 27. I think Monreal did as well. So these are two players who made a significant impact in the side. Obviously, Monreal being one of the stalwarts at the left back, and then Arteta being maybe not necessarily a game changer, but a captain and someone who is now the manager of Arsenal Football Club. So there's. Obviously, the age profile is a consideration. Obviously, the differences in the league and the difficulties of the league are definitely considerations. And it doesn't go just for, which is why I brought the Gravel conversation up and like where he came from. And there's more. But I suggest you going on the subreddit and looking at that post because it's long and it's good. But I feel like with a player like Gyökeres, what I anticipate we're going to see if his career has been anything to go by, which it usually is with players, that even if he's not scoring every touch that he has, which statistically he almost has been, he's not going to stop trying. And that I feel like how many times have we talked about like this horseshoe of death that we have going on with Arsenal, where we're just crying for someone to try to shoot the ball at goal. Yeah. We're going to get that with Gyökeres, I think. Whether he's scoring all the time, he's going to try. And even if it's not going in the back of the net, one of the things that happened with Sanchez, if you recall, it made the other players around him more dangerous too. Because right now, you have to worry about Kai Havertz and all of that, and that's important. I don't think Kai Havertz is as tenacious trying to score goals as Gyökeres will be. And because of that, I think defenders are really going to have to focus on Gyökeres when he's he's a big, physical, strong player that, they're going to have to deal with him. And when you're having to deal with him, you're not able to deal with Saka or Martinelli or whoever's on the left at that point. You're not going to be able to deal with all of them. And then now with Rice pushing forward, you're not going to be able to deal with him sometimes. So I think having someone like that you need to focus on, not and again, I not like Havertz where he's going to sometimes drop back and your midfield has to deal with him. Someone who's your defenders are going to have to deal with constantly. Yeah. It's going to open up more opportunities for other goals from other players. So even if he's not scoring as much as he did, I think that we're going to start seeing other players in the team score more.
Yeah. And, that's kind of the other part of the case for Gyökeres, right? Where that mentality, I know some people kind of roll their eyes at soft factors, but I think there's something to be said about what a relentless personality he is. And, you're talking about how he kind of, his father kind of made him, really like work at his game and not take the easy way out. And, you referenced that moment that he had against us when we beat Sporting. They were down 5-1. It was the 85th minute of the game, and this guy was still killing himself to try to score a goal, right? And he got the better of Saliba. He ran right past Kivior and held him off, slammed the ball against the crossbar, right? Another day, that's 5-2.
Against the best league in the Premier League, arguably a defense in the Premier League, arguably one of, if not the best defense in Europe at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and Gabriel wasn't on the pitch, but you still had Saliba and you still had Raya, and Kivior is no slouch either. So
no, at that point, Kivior was kind of pulling his weight really well.
Yeah. So he's going to bring that to. Just look at how according to reports how desperate he is to come to Arsenal. Right, this guy's refusing to come to preseason training for Sporting. He's talking to directors at the club. He's giving up the parts of his salary to facilitate the move. He really wants to be here, and that's kind of like that's a force of nature that we really could use at the top end of the pitch. And I was watching Adam Cleary's video on Gyökeres, right, and he was showing a couple clips where there's one moment against Everton where they're sitting into their deep block and Saka's one-on-one with the defender, and there's this open patch kind of like just in front of the right half space. No one's running in there. Havertz is kind of sitting among the center backs, and he's just leaving Saka to make it 15 yards and get the ball into the box for him. And then Martinelli is, all the way on the other side, and Odegaard's sitting back in the right half space because that's not him to kind of run into those spaces. Gyökeres would run into that space. Gyökeres would run in there. And also there was there's another clip that he was showing from when we were losing 3-0 to Newcastle. And Rice receives the ball in, pretty much an acre of space entering Newcastle's final third. And you have Timber and Havertz on the right-hand side. Neither of them are making a run in behind the defense. And then on the left, you have Sterling, who has, like the entire left third of the pitch to run into, and he starts drifting out to the touchline instead of making that direct run in. Gyökeres would make that run in behind the defense. He would gamble. He would give, Odegaard and hopefully maybe the likes of Eze to something to aim at from the center of the pitch. So, and on top of all that, even if you don't think Gyökeres is a fit for how we play, at the very least, we are going to continue creating chances. We're going to continue having these half chances against low blocks. And if they fall to Gyökeres, I really like his odds of bagging. So, my excitement for this move is increasing.
Yeah.
And
so
Sorry, I
was going to say there's two things that you brought up there. There's two things you brought up there. One of them is about how he wants to join, right? And I just want to address that really quick because it's something that I mentioned on our chat as being a very, very positive thing for me. And when a player really wants to join Arsenal, I can almost identify with them a little bit more than I could with another player, because I feel like that's what I would want to do if I had the opportunity to play for a team. I'd want it obviously to be Arsenal. I'm biased in that regard because obviously I'm an Arsenal fan, but there's something about someone who's that vocal about wanting to come here and that believes in this project and that wants to give everything he can for this project, that fills me with a lot of hope for what he can do with this football club. And that leads me to my next point, which is we're talking about what he's been so far. And what we've seen from most players, almost all of them that have joined for us, is that they've taken their game to a new level with Arteta and the coaching staff that we have here. And even players who maybe have had, a certain way of playing about them their entire career. You look at a player like Kai Havertz, who came in and had a renaissance here. Sterling was a bit of a lost cause, and that's kind of the exception that proves the rule. But you look at Kivior, you look at Lewis Skelly, who was obviously an immensely talented player, but needed to come in under the right conditions and do what they did. You look at Trossard, who are players that I think took their game to another level. And that's exciting to me too, because I want to know what kind of evolution a player like Gyökeres, with that raw power, thirst for goal, desire to play for us, can actually do under Arteta and this coaching staff. I think that kind of goes for any signing that we make, but I'm particularly excited about what Gyökeres can bring. Or rather what Arteta in the side can get out of him on a team where he's not going to have to run as much as he does with Porto. He has to do a lot. He's going to have to do a lot more. We're going to have the ball more than Porto does. All right. Or more than he has in Portugal, rather. So I'm kind of excited about that.
I do think the flaws are relatively coachable. We're talking about not being able to hold up play all that well, and not
Sporting CP. I think I said Porto. I meant Porto, obviously.
Yeah, Sporting. Not being able to hold up the ball, not prolific in the air, not a great passer. The technical ability isn't elite. So, but I think those are all things that Arteta can work with him on the training ground. And the thing is, right, the more I think about it, the more I realize it's a really great fit in terms of a player who is desperate to improve. And that's the kind of guy that Arteta is going to love coaching.
It's the next level. He wants to go to the next level in his game. He's not happy, which is kind of crazy. I mean, he scored all the goals, and I think he still wants to improve. I think that's 100%. It's a great point. And that's kind of what I'm getting at here. I think there's another level potentially to his game. I hope there is. And I imagine if there's a chance to go to another level, it would be with this Arsenal side and with Arteta managing him. And I think that's why he's so excited to come here. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that looks like.
Yeah. And so, it looks like it's just about going to be wrapped up. Hand of Arsenal actually retweeted the David Ornstein tweet about, us advancing in negotiations with Gyökeres, which he's done this a few times before. It tends to mean that we're on the cusp of seeing that move finalized. So, yeah. I'm excited. And, kind of on the flip side with Benjamin Šeško, I feel like Leipzig overplayed their hand. And also just when we don't have any official confirmation of these things, but when you kind of think back on some of the whispers you've heard, right, about how he didn't want to compete with Havertz. He didn't want to push for the move at all, right? And his agent actually even came out and said that explicitly, said, we're not going to disrespect Leipzig. If we have to stay here for, an extra 3 weeks, an extra year, extra 3 years, that's fine. That's the plan. And then on top of that, kind of this chatter about him wanting a release clause should he come to Arsenal. It's just, it's not convincing, right? It's not encouraging. And when you compare that to Gyökeres, it didn't really ever feel like he ever wanted to be there. And that's why I'm really over dealing with these Balkan strikers. No more. No more. It happened with Vlahovic. It happened with Šeško.
Šeško, yeah, that's two now.
No more Serbians. No more Slovenians. No more Slovakians. Sorry, Slovakia. I'm out. I'm out of the Balkan striker game.
Yeah, I guess Arsenal are too now. Now bring on the Swedes.
I mean, if Erling Haaland is anything to go off of, and Alexander Isak, even closer to home, good talent over there. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you make about Sesko as well. I think that he kind of Zaha'd himself out of a move in a way, and I mentioned that he just signed a new contract. If he really wanted to move, why would you go and sign a new contract like that, like a big one? I feel like that kind of hampered. Of course, the club is going to try to keep you and put a big value on you. Like, I don't know if it was done on purpose or if it was whatever, but I think from a strategic standpoint, if your goal is to move, and do you really want a player that's not really interested in coming here?
Yeah.
If I could tell you, I mean, obviously, if we could get at the same price, I think given the ceiling of Sesko, if it were a money thing and they were the same price, I think you potentially go for a Sesko, and then maybe not. I mean, maybe not. And I mentioned this the last time we had a conversation. I think we need a kind of ready-made goal scorer that kind of can just jump in here and just start banging them out. And
we're at that point.
Yeah, I think that we need to. It's like shit or get off the pot time. All right, with Arsenal, we need a trophy this season. We need a trophy this season.
Speaking of shit or get off the pot, I just kind of one last point of the Gyökeres thing, and then we'll move on. But I am really encouraged by the kind of the transfer side of things here, where we tried to negotiate with RB Leipzig, and they basically refused to budge on this 90 million euro value. Yeah, I still like Šeško better than Gyökeres, but for 90 million euros, no. Sorry, I'd rather go for Gyökeres. And so, for them to basically price Šeško out of a move, I think in the past we would have tried for the rest of the summer to see if we could move them a little bit on that. But I'm really encouraged that Berta said, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the other guy.
Yeah.
Bye.
I was listening to the Arscast and the Arscast Extra, and James was talking about this, and he was, or maybe it was one of the Arscast, one of those amazing podcasts, the
one
gold
of those
standard.
Guys.
Yeah. Everything they say is gold, and and they were talking about how it might have been. Whatever, it might have been the actual on their Patreon about the signing of the new player or whatever the hell it was. Point is, they were talking about how the feeling was that Gyökeres was kind of a Berta guy, and that Arteta really wanted Sesko, and it was James actually. Now that I think about it, and he was saying that is not to say that Arteta does not want Gyökeres, but I think his preference was, and a lot of the fans were, Sesko as well, which I think was interesting because they were talking about how that kind of is an interesting dynamic in play now, because generally speaking, historically, Arteta's kind of gotten who his guy, or at least they've deferred to him as to who they want. But I think now there's the realization, as you were indicating, that it was just not financially feasible, and because of that, I think there was a pragmatic approach to the summer, which is what we want to see, right? We can overspend on a player and then kind of be detrimented in other areas that we're trying to strengthen. And I think where there's a case where you don't have a viable alternative, unfortunately, sometimes that's what you need to do. But in this case, I think because Berto is on board with Gyökeres, I can see how Arteta can see, notices he's a talented player that he can work with and that he wants to be here. And because of that, we were able to facilitate something that still worked and allowed us to get actually what's a really good deal, I think, if the numbers are being reported. I think we're 5 million off or whatever the recent reports are. It's like from 70 or 60. But either one of those numbers really are pretty decent. And allows us to make other moves that we need to in the summer, assuming that we do it. Historically, we've sometimes not done that. But that's another pro of this move. So assuming we can't get Sesko for the amount that we want, which is clearly the case, we're getting Gyökeres for a price that allows us to strengthen other areas of the squad that we need, which is a pro of Gyökeres that we would not have with Sesko.
Yeah. And, I think Arteta probably wanted Šeško because he's he's younger, and I think there's a world with Gyökeres where he might have to be back in the striker market in 2 or 3 years, just because he is 27. But I also think like Česko is a ceiling play, right? You're trying to sign him now because maybe in 2 or 3 years he's the best or the second best striker on the planet. But I don't think they liked him enough where it was Česko at all costs. It sounds like Arteta was like, I would prefer this guy, but I would prefer more to have one of those two in by the time preseason starts, so that they know what they're doing. So, but yeah, I just think what Berta did there, I think will serve us in the long run in terms of negotiations, because I think Edu was very much a kind of a one-track guy in terms of he would kind of zero in on players, and those are the guys. And if they didn't come, then we're just kind of rushing to figure out a plan B. I think Berta has other options lined up, and if you're not going to play ball with him, he'll just go get someone else. And so I think that's going to send a message to other clubs when we deal with them in the future that they can drive a hard bargain if they want, but we are going to walk away if we don't like it. And I think that really does assist with your leverage when you're trying to buy and sell players. So, really encouraging to see, and I'm excited. I'm excited for Gyökeres. I think there's a pretty good chance he'll bang. So we'll see what happens there. But moving on, a few other things to talk about here, and one of those things is that Takehiro Tomiyasu no longer is an Arsenal player. And, I've been a big Tomiyasu fan over the last couple of years. And I know he's been injured, but it's a shame, right? Because I still remember that game against Liverpool where he played left back and he just absolutely made Mohamed Salah irrelevant for 90 minutes. Just an amazing lockdown defender, crazy athlete, amazing cheekbones, but also just like a really highly technical player, and could play across the back line, and just
versatile.
Just a really unique, special talent. And I think he was robbed of a pretty amazing career because of injuries. So before I turn this over to you, I just want to say that a lot of people are down on him, and I understand that he hasn't been reliable at all these last couple of years. But I look at Tomiyasu and I see a player who, if he could have, he would have played 60 games for us. And I just think sometimes when people kind of make these decisions about whether or not we should let go of players based on, how injury prone they are, they let that bleed into their evaluation of that player as a person, and kind of just treat it almost as if they're lazy. And I just want to say that, this was just really horrific luck. And I still think Tomiyasu was an excellent player, excellent mentality. And I just hope that he can, kind of get back on his feet somewhere else, playing wise, and kind of rehabilitate his career. But, John, how does it feel to see Tomiyasu leave?
He was one of my favorite players. He was one of my favorite players. I mean, what an amazing talent he was, and how versatile he was. And I said it at the time. We didn't lose the league a few seasons ago when Saliba got injured. We lost when Saliba and Tomiyasu got injured in the same game. That's what did it. If Tomiyasu did not get injured and he was able to stay fit, I think we win the league that season. That's how confident I am and how good he was. And to have him as a utility player was absolutely amazing. I am confident he would have eventually worked his way into the first team at some point if he was able to stay fit. But it was difficult because I think some of his versatility maybe could have been a little bit of detriment to him because whenever we had other players that were less versatile, so we needed to play them in certain areas, and he was able to kind of slot in anywhere that we needed him, which is what ended up happening. And it's a real just unfortunate situation. And Arsenal history is kind of littered with players like this, of like what could have been with them, and it does suck because this is very much a concrete example of what could have been. That I think we win the league if he stays fit, and it's just a shame because I haven't really seen the discourse about him being lazy and things like that. I don't know where that's coming from. If that's some of the discourse going on, I mean, everyone's entitled to an opinion, but I'll tell you what, I don't see. I've never got that sense from him.
It's not so much that people are calling him lazy. It's just that I think people are kind of dismissing him as a player and just being, Tomiyasu, like, never played. Fuck that guy, basically.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's a kind of short-sighted view of what that player, how talented he was, and how well respected I think he was from Arteta and the coaching staff and the other players on the team.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy, he had his foibles like every other player does, but I mean, for me, he's always going to be a what could have been kind of Arsenal player. And it's a shame. And I'm sad to see him go. And I wish we could have seen more from him. And again, like I said, if he doesn't get injured that same game that Saliba does, I think we go on to at least draw or get some points off City. And, who knows what happens then. I strongly believe we win the league that season if he doesn't get injured. I can't prove it, but it's just my gut feeling.
No, I mean, I'd much rather have seen him against Erling Haaland at the Etihad than Rob Holding.
Right? Yeah. So, all credit to Rob Holding. He's had to step up when he can, but as we saw from his run of games after that, it was just not the level that it wasn't a title. It wasn't a title run performance from him. But I think we could have gotten that from Tomiyasu had he stayed fit.
Yeah. It's Man, when you said what could have been, I'm immediately like thinking of like Diaby and Wilshere and Eduardo.
Ramsey in a certain. Ramsey ended up coming back, but like you remember what he was like before the injury. I mean, he was one of the best players in Europe.
Yeah.
I guess
before he tore his ACL.
I was about to say. Luckily, we haven't seen it with Timber. Knock on wood. He ended up coming back from that horrible injury that he had that ended his season right before it started. But yeah, we do have a lot of players, a history of players who just get injured and become these what could have been players. Diaby and Wilshere, I think, are the examples of that, and Eduardo obviously too.
I think also Rosicky. I'd put Rosicky in that category,
and maybe to an extent Santi Cazorla. I think we saw a lot from him, but I mean, he was plagued with injuries. And it is unfortunate. I think maybe. In a weird way, Gabriel Jesus. I think he might be in that category too. I think so. I think we've seen a lot of injuries from him, and where we start seeing momentum and setbacks, and then setbacks, and he's never really been able to do what he can. And I think he's is a very talented player that should have been able to step in. So yeah, I would put Tomiyasu in that now. Unfortunately, of what could have been.
Yeah, interested to see what he does. I think Gunnerblog actually said that Tomiyasu is looking to be back playing by October. So, we'll see where he ends up. I wish him all the best, and I'm sorry things didn't work out the way that they should have. But on to a situation that I think is kind of getting concerning for some people. And that is, so Ethan Nwaneri has 1 year left on his contract, right?
Yeah.
And there have been negotiations between him and Arsenal. I should say at the top that the current reports indicate that Arsenal are pretty confident that Nwaneri is going to sign an extension and stay. But I guess I want to ask, like, we'll make this a two-parter. Number one, how confident are you that Nwaneri signs and stays? And number two, if you were in charge of the Arsenal negotiations and you're across the table from Nwaneri and his agent, and they tell you we want to be paid like Miles Lewis-Skelly, what would your response be?
Ooh, that's a good question. All right. So the first one is how confident I am. I'm going to go with my heart on this, and I'm going to say that, he's an Arsenal kid, and I feel like he's going to want to at least give it one more season, at least, to try to make the break. But I think he's going to want some assurances, I think. And I don't know that this is the case. This is pure conjecture on my part, probably some projecting, but I don't really know him, and I don't really, obviously, but I can try to put myself in his shoes, right? You're this young, just as a human being, you're this young, talented player, and you've come up through the Arsenal ranks, and you and your best bud, Skelly, are making this kind of breakthrough into the first team and this really exciting Arsenal squad who's actually challenging for things. And now your friend starts being the little bit of the star, right? At the beginning, it was Nwaneri. And if you remember the discourse around it was like, oh, this Nwaneri, he's like this new star. He's like the next Saka or Erdogan, whatever you wanted to call it. He's going to be the next big thing. But then all of a sudden, kind of like out of nowhere, MLS was the one that everyone was talking about. And I imagine that would have some kind of, that he would feel some kind of way about that. That, you know what I mean? That maybe he wasn't getting enough chances because of the position that he played and who else he was competing with for that position. And maybe MLS got a little bit of a better start because of the injuries and the difficulty we had at that left side. But for whatever reasons that it happened the way it did, I imagine the human factor of it would, I don't want to call it jealousy, maybe that's some aspect of it, but I imagine there's a little bit of a feeling one way or another that he has about his chances versus his compatriot. And I kind of had the same worry with Emile Smith-Rowe and Saka as they kind of broke through together. But Emile Smith-Rowe seemed a little bit more laid back than, and understanding maybe. That I always got that sense from him, kind of a subdued, you know what I'm saying? A little bit less of an,
there were definitely like whispers that he wasn't as good with his diet as he should have been, and he didn't condition the way they should have.
Yeah, but and that's 100% true. I guess I'm talking more along the lines of his mentality, like his attitude. It was always a little bit more subdued and and he was always like, have you ever seen any of his interviews? He kind of seems pretty laid back. Obviously, he's a professional athlete. Like they have a certain tenacity to them. But I feel like Nwaneri, I never got that sense from Nwaneri. He was a go-getter. He wanted to be in the star, a star at this club. I'm sure they all do. But I mean,
he's so locked in person. Like, sorry, I feel like I keep referencing this thing in Philly, but just like
the interview,
when I was up there was one point where we just finished filming, and all the players walk out, and obviously you're just like standing there. They're not really paying any attention to you anyway. But all the players walked out. First it was senior players, and then the younger guys came through, and it was Nwaneri, it was Miles Lewis Skelly, I think what's his name, Salah Mahand, Salah Waled Mahand, yeah. And then Josh Nichols, and I think one of the keepers came out, right? 4 of those kids turned to me and the other people in that video, and they were just like, oh, hi. And they, not like that, but they were just like, hey, like, how are you doing? Like, hi, Nwaneri, like, it was like we weren't even there. It was like no one was there. He was just locked the fuck in. Even when like they were just in preseason training, so like he's like there was like an intense vibe about him. No, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like I feel like, I don't know him personally, but I do know competitive athletes, and I know the mentality there, and I knew some when I was younger too. I'm a little bit older now, but I know what that mentality is like. And at that level, it's even more so. And I can't help but think. I keep coming back to it. I can't help but think that there's some kind of a feeling there about the chances that he's getting. And I think it's exacerbated by what Lewis Skelly has done. And I don't want to call it jealousy because I think he's obviously happy for his friend and things like that. But I wonder if there's a why not me? Why am I not getting as many chances? Why am I only coming in for a certain amount of time? I want if I'm going to do this, I want
some kind of assurance that I'm going to be playing more, that I'm going to play a more pivotal role, that I'm going to get the same kind of chances. And I think that's difficult for him get because of who he's up against in that area of the pitch. I think he'll get assurances that he's going to play certain things, but think about if Odegaard's in front of you, if Saka's in front of you, do you think that you're going to become the main guy on that right-hand side, anywhere near that right-hand side anytime soon?
But also on top of that, right, you're hearing that Eze might come in, and he's probably going to take and like if you move to a number 10 role, you have two people in front of you, or if you stick with the 4-3-3, Eze is going to take left wing, or he's going to take left 8. And then there's us being linked to Rodrigo and Madueke.
Yeah.
Two guys who are going to play left wing and right wing ahead of you, right? Or at least that's the thinking, right? So if you're Nwaneri or you're his agent, you're asking Arsenal, where do I fit in here, right? 100%. And the answer probably is you're Odegaard's direct backup at right 8, and they kind of
maybe Saka's backup in the right scenario.
Maybe, yeah. And you have to decide whether or not that's enough. And I would say, and obviously I'm biased here, but I would say at 18 years old that I think that is, especially because, you're looking at an Odegaard who played through injury last season, and we'll see how he starts next season, right? You're looking at a Saka who I think we're entering an era where Arteta's going to try and manage his minutes, and also you're looking at a team that you have seen that it is possible for half these guys to drop like flies by December. So yeah, I mean it's tough because I think he has legitimate questions over his pathway.
Yeah, I think he does, and it's something that's not just a problem. It's hard to call it a problem, but I don't think it's a phenomenon that's unique to him as a young player. I think a lot of young players nowadays, because of your Mbappe's and your Lamar and all these guys, these young players that are making these big Lamar, what the hell? The Barcelona kid. What?
Oh, Yamal
Lamar. I was thinking about I went to Arsenal. I combined both of them.
You combine Lamine and Yamal.
Lamine. You look at Mbappe. You look at you look at all these kind of young players, and now you're looking at Luis Skelly. You looked at Saka breaking through. You're across the footballing world, and I feel like there's an impatience with young players now. And we've had this conversation before about the danger of playing players too soon, these young players too soon. And I think there's a risk, of thinking these players are good enough. As much as part of the whole deal is to see these young players excel, and that's part of like the Arsenal DNA. I think that you need to temper that to an extent. I agree with what you've said before, that you need to temper that. And I think maybe there's an impatience in these younger generations of footballers for instant gratification and immediate stardom that I think is potentially detrimental to development at one particular club if they're not getting the right chances right off the bat, and then B, for their overall development as footballers, because they're going to end up making moves. And you saw it with young Arsenal players like going to Chelsea, for example, and you saw what happened with that. I think the better move for him would be to hold tight, develop with Arteta and Arsenal. I think you're gonna get your chances and just capitalize them when you get them. And that would be my advice. So sitting across the table, if that's the negotiation we're having, I'm trying to convince him of that, I think.
Yeah. And I think I would respond to Nwaneri with two things, right? Kind of based on these concerns. Number one, he's 18, and he's got plenty of time to grow and develop and stop looking at the Mbappes and the Kubarsis and the Pedris and the Lamine Yamals of the world, right? Like he'll get there. Yeah, like he'll get there. And I think his job for this season is just to make sure that Max Dowman doesn't take minutes off of him, right? But the second thing is, if you want that position, go get it, right? Like Lewis Skelly, if you really want to like break it down, at the beginning of last season, he had Calafiori, Zinchenko, Tierney, Tomiyasu theoretically, right, and Kivior ahead of him as left back options, right, and he leapfrogged all of them. And now, granted, right, a lot of this happened because some of those guys were out injured, but when they came back, they didn't take the shirt off him, right? He locked that position down. He made it his. So if Nwaneri wants to become a starter, he's gotta beat out Odegaard. He's got to beat out whoever plays at left 8, right? And maybe that will require a lucky break. And he kind of had that lucky break last season, and he didn't hold the position down either at right wing or right 8. And again, like you said, he's competing with world-class players there, but we all saw that he hit a bit of a physical wall, during that stretch, and that's okay. He's not on the same development line as Lewis Skelly is, but I just think there's a future for him at Arsenal, and I think the way that we are, the age profile that we're targeting with some of our players in those areas now, I think is going to lead to a natural transition for him to take over. Like this is the season where Martin Odegaard's going to turn 27, and we're going to sign. Well, I'm fairly confident we're going to sign Eberechi Eze, right? And he's 27 as well, right? So like these guys are going to phase out just when you hit, that point in your career where you are ready to take over. So, I hope that's kind of the message the Arsenal are sending him, and I hope that they stay. So I guess would you say that you're confident Nwaneri's going to stay?
I think he's going to stay. I think he will. I think he will. I think, if just to at least one more season, I feel like it would be a bad decision to leave right now. I think he's going to get the chances. And you mentioned, we kind of talked about how he needs patience. He also needs a little bit of flexibility. All right. And I don't get the sense that he's kind of like Maitland-Niles, where he would be getting these opportunities. He just did not want to play right back or whatever. And then was wondering why, he's not getting picked on squads because he refuses. I don't get that sense from him. So I think he'll be flexible where we play him. He just needs to be patient. And I think he's going to do that. And, if the club's confident, I'm confident. So I'm going to say yes.
If he said, I'll sign the extension, but you have to loan me out next season, would you do that?
I think that's a bad move for him. I really do. Would I do it? I mean, I would want to keep the player at the club. He's an Arsenal talent. He's an Arsenal boy. Yeah. I want to keep players like that here. I feel like that's what this is about in many regards. Like that's the more, for me, seeing the Lewis Skelly stories and the Saka stories, those are the narratives that are to me personally some of my favorite in the sport. And what I love supporting Arsenal, because we give these young players a chance. So I want him to stay here. I want him to succeed here. If it meant loaning him out, I mean, obviously, I think, yeah, I would. I don't think it's a good move for his career, though. I think he should really sign the extension and really try to make a position his and capitalize on opportunities that I think are going to come at some point in the season.
Yeah. And, I think if he stays, he'd almost be a lock to play significant minutes, like in the opening rounds of the domestic cups. And, if we had one or two dead rubbers at the end of the group phase in the Champions League this coming season, I think he'd also feature in those. And I really do think that this squad is going to rotate heavily this season. I just think by the end of this window, we're going to have a squad that's able to do that. And I think that will afford Nwaneri some minutes. that maybe he otherwise wouldn't get. So we'll see what happens in that regard. I'm not particularly worried at this point in time, but it's not signed yet. So hopefully they do sign it. So last thing before we get out of here, we've already talked about Eze before, but I just thought there was this interesting report. I forget from who, but it's not really a name I'm familiar with. I think it's like Ramon something. But here we go. Ramon Osman. I don't know why I read it that whitely. Ramon Osman. Sorry, I'm Middle Eastern. I should be nailing these first try. Ramon Osman and
Mohammed El Neni. Mohammed El Neni. Come on, Sham.
I'm so sorry. I've disgraced my whole bloodline. But so Mr. Osman is a journalist at 442 in the Sun, and he said that we're negotiating with Palace for Eze. I guess maybe we're trying to kind of restructure the deal to pay kind of a more favorable amount of money, is my guess, instead of paying the £68 million release clause that he has. But so he said that Palace would be open to potentially including a young Arsenal defender who has played a handful of games as part of this deal. I have 4 candidates who fit that mold. I think 4. Did I include Saliba in this? I hope I didn't. No, 4, not including Saliba. I'm assuming Saliba's off the table here, but I'm going to ask you kind of in the order that I've ranked them from most expendable to least expendable, whether or not you'd do it, whether or not you'd include them as part of that deal if it meant getting Eberechi Eze, and you tell me what you think. So number 1, and this is the player I think they're referring to, Josh Nichols.
Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty easy.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
It sounds like Palace are trying to add some young defenders to the roster.
Sure.
So yeah, that's my guess as to who it is.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, Jakub Kivior. Would you make that swap for Eze?
Like a straight swap?
I think you'd probably have to pay a little bit of money on top of it. Let's say Kivior plus £30 million.
Oh no!
How about Kivior plus 25?
Kivior plus 15.
Okay.
Yeah, then I would do that. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
So
I would do that. Calafiori, no.
Kivior plus 15.
Yeah, Calafiori. Is that what you're about to say?
Calafiori, yeah.
No, 0.
No,
not happening.
So I'm guessing that's a no for Lewis Skelly as well.
Yeah. Zinchenko, maybe.
Oh yeah, we could try to be like, oh yeah, he's Zinchenko's 23.
Yeah, he's an Arsenal player still technically.
I thought about tweeting a picture of Rob Holding with like a cartoon mustache on him, and being like, yeah, this is Roberto Holdini.
Callum Chamber Perino. It's like, wait a minute.
This is Sebastian Mustafini.
Yeah,
we know he looks old, but he's actually only 20.
Yeah, Timber, no. Saliba, no. Gabriel just signed an extension, no.
Maybe it's that
what's his
Maldini
name?
guy.
Yeah,
because he played a few games or a couple games this season, I think.
Yeah. Why don't we look up what Arsenal defenders that we have? Is it a first team defender? Do we know that?
What they said was someone who's played a few games for the first team. So it's
so it's a young player.
Yeah, so I think it probably is an academy player, or at least like someone in like the U23s or the U21s.
I think Nichols is he plays right back.
Yeah. I'm not sure who they have
How
behind
about
Munoz.
what about Elian Caseta?
I have no idea who that is.
I just googled it. It says a left back in the under 21 squad. He's also been involved in training with the first team. This is AI. We're doing Arsenal Youth Detailed Squad 24-25. All right, let's look. I guess it's the Arsenal Youth team.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, well, these people are 14 and 15. All right, this is not working. No. All right.
Yeah, I don't think it's any of them, but
No.
yeah. Would you want? I don't think I've asked you this. Would you want Eze on the team?
Would I want Eze? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's a really. Yeah, and it's that Arsenal narrative story too. Like besides just like him being a fantastic player and one that can do it. Like I told you, I love that. Coming home kind of vibe, and I feel like again, it comes to like players that want to be here. He would want to be here. Like he talked about, like one of the saddest moments of his career was like not making it here, and like this is a second chance. Like I want that narrative. I want to see him do it. I'm rooting for him to do that because I feel like I can identify with that. Like that would be me. Like I'd want to do that. And in a way that would motivate a player, like would motivate him in a way that you can't create it artificially.
Yeah. And also, like, I think maybe it sends a message to players that leave the club, either like during the academy days or like, maybe just after, that if you work hard and you kind of climb the ranks, maybe Arsenal will come back for you one day.
Yeah.
You get to kind of live out that dream. But
yeah.
And on top of that, I just think Eze's just a fun player.
Yeah,
I just want fun players.
Totally agree. Agree.
I want guys who are going to carry the ball and like make cool passes and take shots and score free kicks. Just give me a little bit more of that. Give me a little bit more of that individual attacking quality.
Little flair. I want a little flair on the side. I feel like we had like moments of it. But I feel like a player who's kind of one of his main tool in his toolkit is flair. I kind of like that.
Yeah. So
adds a little je ne sais quoi to the season.
Yeah. We'll see. Josh Nichols, welcome to Crystal Palace. We hardly
you heard it here. You heard it here first.
I doubt. I think we're just going to give them money, but But yeah. I am confident that we make that happen, though. I don't know. I have a feeling about that. So we'll see. But we're a little over the hour mark, so we'll leave it there. But thank you guys so much for being here with us, for listening. John, thank you as ever. You guys can follow John at 305cast, and you can follow the pod at Not That Gooner, and you can follow the pod on Blue Sky, Not That Gooner, that Sky Social. You can subscribe to us on YouTube at Not That Kind of Gooner. You can follow the pod on Instagram and TikTok at Not That Kind of Gooner. And if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please do leave us a 5-star review and follow the pod on there as well. It really does help kind of push the pod out towards more listeners, which is always appreciated. So I think I'll be back with Drew later on this week. We're actually working on having a guest who can come on and chat about the Gabriel Hines hire. So we'll chat about that. We'll hopefully talk about his time at Atlanta United and some of the shenanigans he got up to there. And we'll see if we can nail that down. But again, thank you as ever, and we'll be back as soon as we can. Until then, get your mind out of the gunner, and we will talk to you soon. So take care, and bye. Bye.
Secret Gooner. All right, I'm a Gooner. Oh, I love you.
Already! 1 minute to go! Here's the best man against Santi Cazorla! Takehiro shot.